in the studio, live in the studio with Matt Gies. Matt Gies, welcome, man. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Derek. Thank you, Derek. The Christian Joe Rogan. Finally, we meet.
If anybody who's been following along, this is the first time I've had somebody in the new little setup. So we got the official cameras in, and so I could move over to you, and they can see you, on the camera. They could be in the middle. We got this table that we kind of moved and kind of just merged into this little workspace, and then you got me as well. But anyway, I'm grateful. I'm thankful for you, man, the brotherhood that we share, to be able to jump in and have a conversation. I know it's funny, just you and I on the phone earlier talking about, you wanted to share your conversion story on your own, and then we said, hey, why don't we put it together and hop on a live stream and showcase a little bit about you. So if you have questions along the way, feel free to put those in the chat. We will get to those toward the end. But Matt, go ahead and why don't we start with upbringing? What was your faith? What was faith like for you growing up?
Yeah. Faith for me growing up was it was like a house ministry. Like they had church in like different houses. Yeah. It's called The Way Ministries. We did that for a short period of time, but in my early childhood, had that up until about fourth grade. And then like the main leader was caught, I think like, if I don't want to misquote, but cheating on his wife and maybe doing some obviously unholy stuff, or even wrong in a worldly sense. So we got out, we left, and then from there wasn't much church or Christianity or God, I guess, put onto me by my parents really. I don't think I really looked. I mean, I prayed every now and then, but I don't think I really looked for him until maybe when I met you.
Yeah. Gotcha. So it was a house ministry, and that was here in San Antonio or somewhere else?
No, it was in Dallas, Fort Worth. That's where I grew up until about fifth grade.
Okay, got it. Okay. Mm-hmm. So it was. So your parents had been going. There's a little bit of a scandal, which naturally sometimes those things can, rock people's faith or their journey. Mm-hmm. They go like, oh, like is this what churches are like? This is what Christians are like. Yeah. Like they try to be one thing, on a Sunday morning, but then all this inappropriate extracurricular activities are going on behind the scenes.
Yeah. It's funny that you say that because I feel like people use what I just said as an excuse to not have faith or not have to look at it or just completely dismiss Christianity or God altogether.
Yeah.
Look at all the bad that Christians do, or the hypocrisy and things people do that claim they're a Christian, that's kind of the need for Jesus, right? We're imperfect people, so that's kind of validating, what Jesus says about us in the first place. But to get the other side of the perspective, the world likes to look at all the wrongs that the church does. But we did an end of year review, kind of like one of those like YouTube things, but like a church made for itself about what they've done. Mm-hmm. And they brought up all the statistics of all the people that they've helped, different countries that they've given to, how many lives have been changed. I'm talking about like upwards of $6 million given. Over 60 different countries, missions have been done in. It was like 20,000 backpacks. I don't know, something ridiculous. Backpacks would be like for children going back to school to parents who can't afford them, not just here locally, but all over the States. And I think in Mexico and some other places. And so it's like, oh, when a church does something good, oh, that's what they do. That's what they're supposed to do.
Right.
But when something really bad happens, which I think is more minor compared to the grand scheme of things that they do, I think it's looked at more of like, oh, see, you're a hypocrite. I don't have to look at Christianity after all. So
right, 100%. With one of the things, in fact, this past couple of days, there's been a couple of people that sent me a few. Actually, the same article sent from several different people, even about church I'm connected with and like some scandals. Again, this is like 30 years ago, bro. Like, oh, wow. And it's like, and it's always like kind of weird when a scandal happens in any group.
Sure.
Because hey, I'm innocent. I didn't do anything. But it's unfortunate because it taints so many people toward, again, faith, Christianity, church, and all of that. When there's a number of people who were innocent in the mix, or who were not involved or would never condone any kind of misconduct. But the fallout, that collateral damage is real.
Yeah.
But to hear, I mean, of course, we know the reason we're even sitting down is because the story didn't end there.
Right.
But to hear that the story started there and it didn't even hold you back from, being permanently tainted against again, church, Christianity, God, Jesus.
Yeah, I think I was like, well, that's one church. Like, definitely still in exploration mode, especially at that period of my life. But to even further that, like I said, if I were to compare it to like the NBA, like I think Donald Sterling, he was an owner who was pretty racist, had some things happen to him. And then recently, I think one of the Suns, I think it's the Suns, is the president, same thing. Someone's being forced to sell their company for like similar reasons, sexual misconduct, stuff like that. So like, is all of the NBA bad? Is all of basketball bad? Like
right.
Like after all the basketball that they have played, and like I don't know, just trying to compare it to something. But and so then from there, I don't know, I want to share that part, but I was part of. I didn't have a good life after high school, doing some pretty bad things, and I got out of such bad things because of my early upbringing in God and in Jesus, and just like kind of a sudden stop. It looks kind of like, well, like is he an answer? Is he real? Like, let me fully search him out. But I think that entire time I was filled with doubt. Yeah, I just felt like, oh, when I die, nothing's gonna happen. Like I'll just lose consciousness forever. And just had a lot of doubt in general. I don't think I ever fully believed. So then a couple of years after that. I was in it for a couple of years, really trying to see if like, God would reveal himself to me and in searching out, but I fell away again, and didn't just come back until recently in July. Okay. Of last year, 2022.
Yeah. Okay. So then you had this period of wondering, so if I heard it right, so it was, hey, early on, your family was involved in a church, some scandal broke out. Hey, we kind of distanced yourself from God and faith and all that. But then, so post high school, then you had a little bit of a faith journey, and then so you were gone for, what was it, like about 10 years or so?
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe give a year or take a year, but yeah.
Yeah, and then you mentioned some of the doubt. So like, again, I think people relate to that. I relate to that. It's interesting. I think sometimes when you're in the faith as long, I think people make assumptions, I think, about you or how much faith you have because you some people just haven't stopped. Right? Like, okay, well, yeah, I haven't stopped going, but there's the doubts that can creep up along the way. So what doubts did you have, and what's helped you to overcome them along the way?
That's a great question. I would say even now, it's not like I'm completely void of any doubt.
Yeah.
But for the first time ever in my life, my belief like far supersedes my doubt. Yeah. But I think just looking at life and being like, why did all these bad things happen? I think that's a very common thing that everyone thinks, God's not real, because why would all these bad things happen? I related that to just freedom of choice. Like, if God's really gonna, I was like, if you think about it, if you're in God's shoes and you created us, like you want people, to do these good things, but at some point, if they don't, you're gonna have to force them, right? And there's gotta be some kind of punishment for not doing the right things, or, and so just, I think God fully given the earth like freedom of choice, which is like freedom of consequences on top of that. I think it's, it helped me overcome that. Just feeling like my prayers were not being answered were a huge one. Yeah. And then I think there was this thing on I was like Instagram story or whatever, but it was like, I think it was from a movie or something, or in court, and there was a priest on the stand, and it was like, he said something about questioning his faith, and he said, well, I prayed for God to give me strength, and he gave me, problems to overcome so that I could receive strength. And, I prayed for God for, I can't remember the things, but it was like, insert positive attribute. Okay, here's problem, so that you can gain positive attribute, and ultimately, like, decisions I've made in my life, like, I don't know what's best for me. Like, I'm just now finding out that I made a huge mistake in the choices of people that I decided to date. Sure. Right. And I thought I had so much knowledge because I read books. I've read, Google. I've done a lot of research on it, and I still didn't know. You know what I mean? So what I wanted for myself was probably not the best thing for me at the time. So that helped me come. I think those two things together helped me come to understanding, like, hey, God, like, because there's been things in my life that are like, unexplained, not a coincidence. Like that's just too much confirmation,
Sure.
right? So I think God knows what's best for me more than I do myself. So coming into that realization, because when you're young, you think you know it all. You think you know what to do.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. No, it's powerful. It's powerful and it's meaningful when I reflect on where we get our values from, and when we realize if I'm basing it only on myself and what I think is right, depending on the situation and circumstance, but then we have a track record of our history of what we've been through, mistakes we've made, things that we regret, things that we're ashamed of and embarrassed to even talk about, then what it helped me, it's in a similar way, is realizing like clearly I don't have it figured out. And on my own and in my own way, I'll mess things up. I'll hurt relationships. I'll damage people. I won't make best decisions, period.
Right.
And if that's true, then I'm not a great source in and of myself. So it's almost like if there is a source of water, then my stuff's contaminated. Mm-hmm. So I need to tap into something else.
Right.
That's bigger and better than me. So anyway, I'm hearing that from you, is realizing that the way of doing it on your own and leaning on your own understanding, wasn't leading to ultimately what you wanted.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
for sure. I think too. I don't even. This is kind of the first time I'm thinking about my old doubts and how I've overcome them.
Yeah.
So I think I was kind of like didn't even think about my doubts too much. It was more of like other questions that I had in life, which it seemed that Jesus had the answers to that solved them, like new things. Like it's kind of like, oh, I'm older now. These are the things I'm seeing. God really seems to have the answer for them, and they're bigger than those things I had doubts on. But now that you mentioned it, I was just kind of thinking, I was like, oh, okay. So
yeah. And so was there a turning point for you when you really made a decision this time around to be like, hey, I want this to be number one. I want this to be the main thing.
Yeah.
What was that for you? Like what happened?
Well, I think I first had to get rid of my doubt. Because I tried really hard for like maybe 2 years, 3 years. I can't remember how much time, but it just didn't really seem to work. And I think it's because the whole time my doubt superseded my faith.
Yeah,
right? It was greater. So I think the real big thing for me was when I was I was going to college, right? And it's funny because I think college is like a typical place where you're like you lose faith, right? Like,
right.
But I was in an intro to sociology class, and I was kind of in the point of like. My only marriage, my past marriage was kind of new. It was kind of coming to a close, to a violent point. But I was going over statistics on marriage in America and the years and how they've changed, and seeing that about half of marriages in all of America are going to fail, like period, like from everyone, right? And then seeing different statistics on what hires your chance of having a successful marriage.
Yeah,
it should be like education. Making more money. Did you have good parents and good? So it's one of the biggest ones.
Yeah.
Did you go through divorce and did you have a good family life or childhood? And then, funny enough, being a Christian, like lowered your chance of divorce by like 14 to 16%. So like some people may look at that and be like, oh, that's a small amount. So there's like 300 and something million people in the United States of America. Yeah. Like, I don't know how many marriages that would constitute. If I'm going low, I might go like 40 or 50 million people. So like what's 14 to 16%? We'll go 15, go in the middle of that. It's still millions of marriages that are saved or that are more successful because of Christianity, right? And so, trying to organize that in my head, like with, like for instance, what about like a Muslim religion, right? It didn't say that. I don't know why I didn't listen to Bible music. It's not a major religion in America, United States, enough for the education. I don't know, but and this is coming from a place of not knowing much or being in the Muslim religion. But my take on that was like, I think they would have like a lower percentage, not even looking at it, but just because of like the ostracizing, and I feel like you would get, at least in certain countries or certain groups of whatever. Some I think might even be like physically threatened, or like it would. It's just like I feel like you would have more freedom to get a divorce in Christianity than you would in like something like that, right?
Yeah.
So knowing well that there's not much punishment in Christianity for divorcing your husband, or vice versa, right? So having that freedom, and then still that percentage is what it is. You know what I mean? So that stuck out to me. And then I don't know why, I just kept thinking about it, right? And so I started thinking about 1 Corinthians 13:4.
Yeah.
Right. And that was I've not been in my Bible for 10 years, whatever.
Yeah, right.
And that I still remember that verse because it was the most amazing, even if I'll never come back to Christianity, what a beautiful verse that is. Love is patient, love is kind, it is not seeking revenge, jealousy,
right.
Well, what the scripture says. But I was like, hey, is that like a legit reason why Christian marriages last longer? Like, if that's right, what else did they have right? Right. So that was like the spark of like thinking about Christianity over again. Yeah. Furthermore, I thought about it, and I know there's statistics like this. So we have more information in one day, maybe 1 hour, than if you go back 100 years and then take all of the time that we've ever had in all of humanity. We have more information in that 1 hour a day, whatever it is, still amazing, in that one period than the entire like history of mankind.
Right.
You know what I mean? With a society that has Google on their cell phones, they can any answer they want about marriage, right? They can go to it whenever they want. Like the plethora of information that we have, and science and research and clinical psychologists, and yet these people who were like lowly fishermen, like that was not a great occupation back then. Living in a desert with no technology. So you mean to tell me that like they had better knowledge, better wisdom than we do now? Like, is that if that's not from like a spiritual being or like someone higher up? Because what I'm arguing is like people say, oh, maybe women didn't have rights back then. Well, I'm saying like use those attributes that they say in the Bible today, because again, it's now today. 36%, I believe it is, the first marriages end in divorce in Christianity. So like those principles are being applied today, right? Or at least some of them. So that's really stuck out to me.
Yeah, man. Well, what's crazy about it's to think through that perspective of like even in the Christian faith, like how again. So you brought up the example of like it's not like you're not like ostracized necessarily like for again divorce, or like it's not like a big like deal. And again, I remember even coming across one of the mega pastors, like it was several actually, I guess it's now, and everything's very public. You know what I'm saying? Like you don't have to Google very much to figure out people in Christian settings who've been divorced, even people in bigger leadership positions. Yeah. And so to think about how the contrast of saying that it's not because like they would be oddly punished just to eliminate more of the whatever, I guess the stigma,
like forced marriages. You gotta stay together.
Yeah, exactly.
Even though you're unhappy.
There's more liberty than ever as far as making decisions like that. But yeah, no, it's powerful to hear, as you said, that your experience in a sociology class will lead you to the conclusion of, oh, like this is adding to my belief in the power of the virtues described in the Christian scriptures, in the Bible,
right?
To help you ultimately move forward, which is it's pretty crazy that God will use that. Because I do believe that God will use anything, right? Like God, will, whatever we're willing to give Him, God will use to help us if we are open to it, right?
Yeah.
And I think this is so huge.
Well, that was I'm hard headed. Like God must be up in heaven. Like this dude is stubborn. Like I was thinking today because I was having a little incident with my girlfriend now.
Yeah.
Very small. But I noticed a little bit of frustration within me.
Yeah.
And I just kind of laughed because I was like, man, if I'm frustrated with that, like how frustrated is God with all of us? Like, or Jesus with us,
Right.
Constantly like doing the dumbest stuff, right? So I just kind of laughed out loud for that.
Yeah.
But that was just like a one thing of that. Like, there was like a lot of other things that had to like continue to convince me. Like
right.
That was just like a spark. Like, oh, maybe it might be something here,
Yeah. So anybody who doesn't know, Matt and I going back 10, 12 years, like there's times, and you and I said this when we reunited, we hadn't really spent any time together like in a decade, which is like crazy to think about age from that perspective as far as like getting older and not seeing somebody for a whole
flies by, guys.
decade. But I remember you initiating, on Facebook, and we're over here having this conversation via text, instant messenger, and then we're going to get together. And I just remember even some of my embarrassment that I felt, right? For in some ways, how when I looked back, I was like, man, I felt like maybe I was overly harsh, or I wasn't a great representative, or you know what I'm saying? Like, did I have the respect? Did I display honor? Did I love? Was I patient? Was I kind? Even back to that scripture, right? And I think it reminded me like the mercy that we can make mistakes in life, but then like God is such a masterful job in like cleaning it up.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, so,
Yeah.
so anyway, I appreciate you being gracious. I wouldn't have been bothered, and I was mentally ready if you were like, negative experience with the church that I go to and with you and, in our campus ministry. Like, I wasn't sure how much you were going to go into, but I was willing for you to hear it all and like, really, to be understanding and respectful. But the fact that you just, you didn't make that part of the story, which, look at him over here. Love does cover over a multitude of
part
sins.
Of the story. He kicked me out, y'all.
It's crazy, man. But I'm grateful, man, to see you, really making an impact. Even you connecting with people. You even trying to connect with me with people to again mentor in learning about Jesus, and it's a special thing, man.
I'll make sure before we go on, I want to give you credit, because like you said, there's some things that happened or whatever, but I think the ability to forgive was so easy because you were so genuine.
Yeah,
I knew everything that you were doing was coming from a good place. Rather than sometimes you can tell when someone does something, it's for like, oh, I'm going to gain more power out of this, or this person will look at me in a good light, or I'll get this girl, or like there's some kind of ultimate reward for what they're doing. But for you, I feel like it was like, hey, I'm really trying to obey God. I'm trying to do this out of love. I'm coming from a really, really like honorable, like you're trying to come from the best place possible.
Yeah.
So I knew that about you. So I was like, oh, he didn't have malicious intent.
Right. Well, what it felt like in experiencing on my side of it was like I looked back and you use the expression that I helped keep you out of the church or whatever, right? So again, like and my memory was similar in that it was like having that conversation about like you not coming around. And I remember like when I look back, I was like, what made me like willing to have that conversation? Like, and I look back and I go, was I just like being the good soldier? You know what I'm saying? Like as opposed to
because there was like 3 other guys in there,
right?
I was like, you make sure you do it. No, just
like was it like this element of like, hey, be the good soldier, go have the conversation, as opposed to when I look back now and I'm like, I do believe in regret, and some Christians don't. Or like, hey, like you can never regret anything, and everything is a lesson.
Regret's a sin.
And you right, you wouldn't be the man you are today, or you wouldn't be the woman you are today if you regret anything. No, like I look back and I go, I do have like how I wish I would have handled that situation. Sure. Like now looking back, I wish I would have been more gracious, and I wish I would have. And again, in a weird way, I wish I would have fought more for my friend, in the confusing circumstances that that was involved.
We both get kicked out. We'll start our own church.
But no, I appreciate that. It was such a great reminder, and I told you like there's been so many losses like in people around me, and I think having you as a brother would come back to me. It was like part of 2022. It was a big blessing for me in 2022 having you come back into my circle. Because it was like, it was this guy showing me like, hey, like son, you messed up back then, and you appropriately needed to apologize, which I did, when we reconnected. But like you messing up, you making mistakes isn't even beyond my redemption. Like my redemption can still have an impact, even though you've made mistakes, even though you hurt people, or even though you were wrong, or even though you were somewhat of the good soldier, but I can still redeem and take care of that situation. So I'm like, bro, like the fact that you would want to be my friend, the fact that you'd want to like even like get back in the word together, be over here even in the podcast studio is like, man, like it's a big expression like from God in him showing me like, bro, like, son, like, your mistakes from a much younger age are not going to hinder the impact I'm still going to have with people around you. So
yeah, and I think going back, like when we first reconnected, I was like, man, I would love to have a friendship with him again because we do laugh a lot and we do share, I think, deeper perspectives on life that are pretty unique. I don't think it's like typical conversation you have with somebody else.
Yeah,
I think the big thing for me was like, is it going to be the same, or there's going to be like these extremely strict rules or something like that? And it's like your humility and your everything that changed. I was like, man, I can tell this friendship is going to be like 10 times the friendship it used to be. So
yeah, praise God, yeah, 100%, man, 100%. I think, I think there's I do ask God to send me people that were going to help people, and I think you're already doing that. You're already finding people to serve and to help, and stuff that you did over Thanksgiving. I remember that as far as you like organizing stuff to be able to give to people who weren't able to afford it on their own. It's just super powerful. So,
and I prayed for a friend in Christ, or put more people around me that were trying to follow God, because when you don't have any, man, it's pretty hard.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess I have to ask about like current events with everything going on, manosphere, red pill, like in your Christian faith, like what does it look like? And maybe it's reconciling the two, right? As far as like, because that's a big influence right now with men. And I'm curious, like, what's your like perspective and kind of in having some of those things in like your back pocket or in your thought process, but then still like putting like the scriptures first. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
Because and correct me or push back on your perspective on it, but it's like the element of again, I don't know if it's completely throwing all of that stuff away, or like, is there stuff of that you still hold on to or cling to as like this part was valuable, even though this other part wasn't?
So
go ahead.
So a little confused.
Yeah, no, I'm just curious. Like, you reconciling your faith with some of the red pill perspective, or maybe you've thrown it all away, or maybe you've kept some of the perspective.
So has my faith got like completely made me think everything in like the red pill space is invalid? Is that your question?
Right. Okay. Along those lines, right?
No, I think the red pill space would make me believe more, because I think the biggest problem with them is that the way that they talk.
Yeah.
They're not very they're not considerate of other people's feelings or emotions, which I understand there's a place for that with the way society was at one point, but it's like that could be like that could be like a very small part of it instead of being like 95% of it, right? The way that they talk to people, the language that they use. I mean, you were talking about this not too long ago when we talk about like wives, like there'll be people in the Christian space who are like, hey, Ephesians 5, wives submit to your husbands. And then they completely skip the next part about, hey, love your wife as if she was your own body. Don't be harsh with her. And then if you're saying to love your wife, well, love is defined in 1 Corinthians 13:4 again, right? So how are you talking to her?
Yep.
Right? Are you talking to her with love? Are you asking her to do things or making a final decision and explaining why and being Jesus-like in that way? Like, are you taking your part up as a man? Same thing with like the red pill space. Like, there's very little talking with love in there. In fact, I feel like the only people that are really learning from the lessons that they have are the people that are just able to like, I hate to bring politics in this, but like for instance, if we were to go, like, there's a lot of people who like absolutely hate Donald Trump, right? But there's a lot of people who don't know, like, he made, like, it used to be a joke, like, peace in the Middle East. Like, that was a complete joke. But there was a lot of people don't even know there was 3 countries that he got to have relations and recognize Israel again and resort to, because I don't know if people know, there's certain countries in the Middle East, like, if you have Israel in your passport, like it's invalidated, you can't come in, like, because they're not recognizing it, right? Yeah. And then they have business relations, blah, blah, blah. Well, he got nominated for like Nobel Peace Prizes. And then there's certain other policies that he instituted. Like, I feel like if you were to say, hey, and they actually did this, they said like, oh, hey, Obama did these policies, or I think it was Obama or Biden, whatever, did these policies, like, what do you think about them? And they agreed with them. They're like, oh, just kidding, it was Donald Trump. And they were pretty upset. But it's like the only people who are going to really learn from that are the people who can look past all the hate, all the vitriol, all the ruthlessness, the really spiteful way of talking, and actually see the the lesson involved in it. And that's not easy for a lot of people to do because a lot of people get very emotional very fast.
Mm-hmm.
So, but with that being said, I think me and you kind of talked about it. I feel like if you look past all the vitriol, again, all the angry talk towards women or relationships in general, whatever, you can see that there's a lot of lessons in there that are biblical.
That's it right there. Yeah.
Which probably sounds crazy to some people.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's it, right? I think the baby in bathwater kind of concept, right? Like there's a baby in there. Like there's something good in there. Like and sometimes there's individuals who say, I think people talk about Andrew Tate, like the idea that he will say some of the things he says are right, but he says it in the most unbelievable way possible, so that even if there is validity behind what he's saying, that the delivery is so difficult for you to process, and people talk about that's purposeful and it's part of his advertising and marketing and me being able to do that. But it does make you think through, like not throwing out everything, that there's some of these lessons that people are learning that are incredibly valuable in the personal development space, in the Christian space, in the red pill space. And there is, I think the fancy word is when people talk about like a Venn diagram where it's like the circle and the circle, and there's is elements of overlap, and to understand it and comprehend it and break it down is important.
You're completely right. It's a catch-22 because Andrew Tate, I believe, was already doing YouTube videos for 2 or 3 years. Yeah. And then he did an offensive video where he was kind of how he is now.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was on purpose or out of coincidence, but he noticed that the views just skyrocketed. So, I mean, you look at Colby Covington, who saved his career by being extremely offensive, right? Like being offensive gets attention. Like if it is a phrase in news, if it bleeds, it leads, right? It's not there for no reason. Like the more of that, the more of it bleeds, it leads, like the more attention you're going to get. But at the same time, there's going to be people who are not going to receive your message. Yeah. So it's almost like you have to sell out if you want to get this level of fame, instead of maybe touching a smaller amount of people, but them actually receiving the message and maybe just trying to grow organically, without using that tactic.
I think he just said Andrew Tate is a sellout. No. Clip that.
No, I think the people who can look past that have learned a lot from him. But don't get me wrong. There's plenty of things he says I disagree with.
Yeah, same. Yeah, we're not
completely endorsing him.
Right. We're not part of the war room. Yes. All right. Anything? So let me see your faith perspective. So we got that.
Well, there was a lot of other things.
That
happened to get me to finally believe.
Yeah.
So shortly after me seeing the statistics on marriage and pondering all the things that I previously talked about, I was like, okay, if I'm going to consider this, let me consider logically, like, can God even be real and these kinds of things. So essentially what I got it down to is that I either have to believe something was always here from the beginning, right? It was either an entity with intelligence or it was materials flying around in space, right? And then over billions of years, those materials just happen to just like create us. But when I look at the design of Earth, right, or the design of how life can even exist, it's very, very specific and extremely, extremely rare of how us even being in existence, right? This is something I actually went up and researched, but there's 4 things that need to happen in order for humans to exist throughout the evolutionary process, starting from the beginning. And each one of those have less than 10% chance to happen. And so when you combine all of those, it's less than 1% that we should even be here. And then I looked up for some reason I had it in my mind. I found out I was wrong after I became a Christian, like soon. Like recently I found this out, but I thought that if the Earth was slightly out of orbit or slightly out of place, that we wouldn't be able to exist either.
Yeah, I heard that. Yeah.
And now that I word it like that part might be true. But the habitable zone of where the Earth can be is about 932,000 miles, which seems like a lot, but when you kind of like all of space, it's really not a lot.
Yeah.
And so me taking into consideration, like, hey, either there was a guy here with intelligence who created all this that seems to have intelligence inside of it, or this intelligence just created itself by molecules just floating around, which like that didn't really make much sense to me, right? Like the there being someone here before that made more sense with intelligence, right? And then I don't know if this completely, I thought about this earlier. It was like, hey, like us humans, like we have intelligence, right? Like we created computers and cell phones. So I don't know if this would be the equivalent, but like if the materials here on Earth are here, right, to create computers and cell phones. Obviously, that's where we got it from. But if we weren't here in like 1 billion years, would they just create themselves?
Right.
Like that doesn't make any logical sense to me.
Right. I think that they call it the fine tuning effect. The idea, the whole idea of if you broke a stopwatch in a million pieces, or smashed it with a hammer, 1,000 pieces, whatever it is, and you shook it up like a million times, it's never gonna make a stopwatch, right? So that's one, I guess, way they explain the fine tuning argument for existence, so for sure.
Yeah. So
you over here into some apologetics over here,
Funny enough, apologetics is one of the original reasons why I left the faith.
Really?
So like apologetics made me leave, and then a school,
sociology,
college made me get back in. It's so opposite.
Yeah.
So then from there, my belief was like, okay, hey, an intelligent being is here. That whether that could be an alien or it could be like actually God or whatever. Right. Like that isn't just like, oh, Jesus is real, like because of that one simple thing that I believed. But the next thing that came to me was I've achieved and received a lot of things in my life. Right. I haven't achieved as much as like I'd like.
Sure.
Or even I feel like to be in like a, content even in a worldly sense. But I for instance, I'll give you an example. So I watched a Lil Wayne video, and there's a video that is highlighted for like they play all the time, but they skip out the godly part of this interview that Lil Wayne did. So he asked one of the Sports Center people to interview him, and he was talking about mental health, where he said he was like suicidal and stuff like that. And at one point he said, at the height of my career, I was extremely lonely and depressed. And the reporter couldn't believe it. Because if you were around, like in Lil Wayne's time, there was not one artist, not one celebrity, movie star, nobody in the world who was more famous than Lil Wayne, right? Yeah. Like any girl he could want, anything he could buy, he could get. There was nothing in a worldly sense that was out of reach for him. If he wanted it, boom, it's his, right? Yeah. And so the reporter's just like, I can't believe it. What about all your friends? What about all these things? He was like, yeah, but when they were gone and I was by myself, I was lonely. I felt a hole in my life. Yeah. And I'm like, it's probably pretty safe to say I will never achieve the level of being able to have whatever I want as Lil Wayne. Right. Right. So I'm like, ultimately, like, what does make you happy then? What can make you content without wanting anything, right? Ooh. So I started thinking about times in my life that I had been content, trying to think back about when was I the happiest? When did I not need more, want anything? I was just fully happy being in that moment. And the things that kept coming back to me were the times that I'd spent with family, spent with friends, laughing, having a good time, just being with the people that I love and sharing those moments. Yeah. And so to me, I thought deeper than that. I was like, okay, well, I can't just hang out with my friends for the rest of my life and be happy, right? Like, obviously got to go to work, got to achieve things, do different things to do, family, blah, 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 right? So then I thought, well, what is the common ground that's making me content and making me happy in that area? And what I came to determine was, man, I'm with people that I love. We're all sharing love between each other, right? That's why I wasn't thinking about my career or wanting this or wanting that, because we were sharing in love. And so shortly after that, I got into my Bible. And when I think about me getting into my Bible, it's really weird because it did not happen very often. And I probably didn't get even after that, get into my Bible very often after that. So for me to find the scripture, I think was, probably something that was like given to me, right? Like, so anyways, that scripture that it talked about was like, whoever does not know love does not know God, because God is love. And so for me specifically, like maybe someone else would have viewed that and it would have been like, oh, whatever, right? Like, oh, that's cool. But for me, it was like, well, I just determined to be content and be happy in life. You need to be sharing love, between your people, and that's when you're the happiest, right? Yeah. So if God is love and I'm sharing it, and that's when I'm the happiest and content, well then, hey, I need God, like that it just really correlated with me in that sense. Yeah. And so that was something that at that point I was like, oh, okay, there might be really something to this.
Yes. I've heard the expression where some people come, there's a variety of different ways people come to faith. Some people come, like, hey, like you're door knocking, and or some people, for me, was my basketball teammate had reached out to me for a course of 3 years. But to hear that the role that apologetics has played in your life, and then again, it's the sociology, the apologetics, and it's powerful because it reminds me that there's different things that could help different people to come to faith, and it's not just like, hey, one dimensional. Hey, this is one trick. You know what I'm saying? Like, just preach the word at them, and like even again, Jesus did say, it's not like he didn't say that by your love people will know that we're his disciples. That's good. And again, does that mean that's the only thing that can be used for people to be able to come to faith? And but it's interesting, like you tied so much of it back to both. It's like it's not and or. It's not like love or apologetics, love or logic and reason. It was both. When you thought back to experiences that you had that were you were most fulfilled, most happy, most content, it was still surrounded about the concept of love. And then that combined with some of what you were learning sociologically, and then even what you were learning from a apologetics perspective, really helped.
Yeah, and I think for me too, because I know there's some people who are so scientific. For me, it was like I could either continue to do things like research what is the habitable zone of Earth, and science, this, that, and the other. Like, but ultimately, I don't think anyone on the atheist or the faith side is going to be a 100% with science or believe like this is for sure what it is, right? So for me, it was more like based on the logic of the things that I'm observing, what is true, right? Like I couldn't go to science and completely 100% disprove or prove anything. So it was like, let me not obsess over this one area, but let me see the areas that I can come to a logical conclusion to, and determine how that affects my faith.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Another thing that I thought about too, and there was things too that I felt like my mind would automatically think about that I needed to do to improve my life. Didn't have any logical reason. I didn't understand why I think I should do that, right? So at one point I was deep into politics, right? I would view it on YouTube when I drove, sometimes at work in between customers, whatever. Like it was almost like a novela or soap opera that was happening in real life. Like what was going to happen next, right? But like I feel like the Holy Spirit was convicting me to like, hey, this isn't good for you. Like stop watching this, right? But what I got from that added to my testimony. And the reason why is because I saw so much evil in the world, right? There's so many people, again, like Lil Wayne had, that can buy anything that they want. I mean, we're talking about like 20, 30, 40, a million times what Lil Wayne had, right? Like they can control, they have decisions to control the like societies in the world, right? Yeah. And there's so many, not even just now in our time, but in the past, so many evil things that have been done that I don't think are natural for humans to do. Like if you have everything, like why would you destroy an entire population or society for you to gain some type of resource like money or whatever the case that won't give you any more resources to buy anything that you can already buy now? Like there's nothing that you would actually gain. Right. Yeah, yeah. So to me, it's like, that's not natural. Like that makes me believe that there's some kind of evil spiritual force. And naturally, if there's an evil spiritual force, then I believe that there would be a counter, like good spiritual force. Right.
Yes.
But yeah, so this is kind of off topic.
Yeah.
Did you want to say something about that?
I do.
Okay.
I think I've heard a number of people share, even some of the influencers, right? Like I think Andrew Tate's mentioned it, Sneako's mentioned it, as far as guys who are influencers and on the masculine side, like the presence of evil helped convince them of God, which it does for me as well. the Christian perspective on it even more so, because the reality that the Christian perspective defines in my lived experience has been accurate before I was ever a Christian. So when you studied out the Christian faith and you see that inside the faith, it says that people will be enslaved to their sin. Like, so in other words, they'll feel trapped. They can't change. They're stuck. This habit is gone. They can't get out of it. If people feel that, we might use different language today. Again, trapped, stuck, can't get out. It's a habit. It's a vice, whatever language you might call it. The Bible calls it being enslaved to sin, and it described that Jesus was sent to help set us free from that sin. So sometimes I like the idea of like delineating between there's one thing to be forgiven of your sins, and then what I've seen in my own journey is, but it's also different for you to be freed from it. I've met plenty of forgiven people that they're still in the process of like figuring out how to get freed. I've been in those situations where I'm like, oh, am I freed from this, or am I back entangled in this?
Yeah.
But ultimately what you're saying is the faith perspective is similar to me, is giving you the best perspective of the reality that we live in when it comes to evil, when it comes to good, and what it describes as good as indeed being good, because we've lived life enough to be able to say, oh, I've seen that. Again, before I was a Christian, as a Christian, I've been able to see that more. When you talk about why relationships don't work, it's crazy when you could tie it back to something that the scriptures talk about avoiding. I'm not talking about just marriage relationships not working. I'm talking about friendship relationships not working, teammate relationships, coworkers not working. Like, if you dig deep enough and you're observing, hey, well, what happened? What took place? But there is some kind of sin that the Bible talks about not being slaves to and being set free from, that was involved, that creates a whole bunch of problems with society, with politics, with family, with friends, with lovers, with marriages. So anyway, that just your point about that observed reality really helped you.
Yeah, I think it's very rare where you see someone committing sin on purpose, that it actually works out. And eventually, and then again, you don't know what's going on in the background. Some people, like maybe, for instance, I've seen people have be into like polygamy or having, two girlfriends at the same time, whatever the case may be. And on the outside, it looks good, but you don't know what's going on in the background. You don't know what's going to happen in the future. You don't know what problems it's going to cause, later. And that's just, one example of sin. But yeah, I see like I think this is a big problem with society. Whenever we say something, when we generalize something, people don't, well, there's this exception and that exception. Like, hey, I'm talking in general is what we're talking about, right? Like over 51% of the time, like when you do this happens, right? And I definitely feel like there's usually sin reward ends up in some type of punishment or something negative happen.
Yeah. Yes. And sometimes, and it's not felt immediately, but along the way, the idea of you reaping what you sow, you reaping what you sow, like you sowed this for long enough.
Yeah.
A friend of mine gave me advice along the way. He's talking about being as a 37-year-old. He said, what you're going to begin seeing as a 37-year-old is you're going to have friends you had when you were a teenager or even in their 20s, when their decisions, and he was talking about their sin, when their sin begins to reap that harvest they've been sowing for all these years.
Yeah.
They may not have had that harvest when they were a teenager. They may not have had that harvest when they were 20s. They may not even have had that harvest when they were in their early 30s. Yeah. But what you'll see in this, again, I'm in 37. I'm getting into my later 30s. In my later 30s, he said, you're going to see people's lives falling apart, and people are going to begin to reap the consequences to sowing all of that sin for years, and it's getting into the point of decades. And there's going to be massive things you're going to see, and it's unfortunate and it's sad, and I think that's it's heartbreaking to see. Again, marriages falling apart and people throwing their lives away.
Yeah. Well, if you think about it, it's like, again, when you're young, your 20s, you're prideful, right? You think you can know what to do. You have Google, you have books, you have a lot of resources. You know what I mean? That if, hey, these people seem to know what they're talking about, like, let me follow them, or I can just go for advice, whatever, right? And then as time goes by, you reap some consequences. Like, oh, okay, well, then I learned from that mistake. Now I'll do this, which is still not the right thing, but you're like, oh, I learned from it. Now I'm going to do it my way, this way. And then you're like, oh, well, this failed again. I'm going to do it my way again, this way. Well, it's like, eventually, are you going to come to a conclusion that like your way's not working?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yep.
and there's some people that don't. And that's even more sad to see. I would argue that's worse than seeing the fall aparts at 30 and then finally coming to Jesus, or even if we're talking in a worldly sense, coming to a better way of living your life, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the people who are 40, 50, 60 still doing the same thing and never end up happy, like that's the people I think that are really sad. Like,
Yeah.
eventually, I think you got to be humble enough to and let your pride down, be like, hey, my way hasn't worked for all these years. Like, I got to try something else. Let me talk to someone who knows, who does have success.
Yes. And there's a passage that talks about that, the idea of in their misery, they will seek God.
Mm-hmm.
And there's I think that's Hosea. And so anyway, all of that to say, but I liked what you said too about the amount of information we have. Like if or whether it's knowledge or access to knowledge, if knowledge that we have or access to knowledge is what leads to a better, stronger, healthier society, then it's a broken equation, right? The idea, that's what you were saying earlier, is the amount of information or knowledge that we have access to because of the internet at our fingertips. You know, I mean, literally, I mean, to the point of even like with have you messed with chatbot at all?
The what?
Have you messed with the chatbot, the GPT chatbot?
What's that?
Okay, so I'll share a story. So all right, so one of the things with chatbot is you can. So chatbot is one of the trending things in the tech world, and even the business owner world, because you could ask it to write certain things. So I could ask it to write, write a poem for my wife who's Puerto Rican, African American. She has dimples, she has curly hair, she's beautiful, great personality, modest dresser, and then like in a matter of 30 seconds, you have a poem. So what I did is I told it to do that. And then my wife got home.
Does Angelina watch your podcast?
So I told the chatbot to write it. It writes the poem. So I'm like, all right, I'm gonna read it to my wife to see if she if it sounds like me or if it sounds like a robot.
Okay.
So I read it to her, and then so she was encouraged, built up, and it's okay. Confession.
Why are you Indian? Why are you backhanding? You can't give something and take it away. Just kidding.
But to that point, so one of the things I'm doing from a professional standpoint right now is I'm building out some curricula for daycares, and then so children can grow up with principles from God's word, principles in the success literature as well. And one of the things I did with chatbot is I asked it to write me a story about courage, and I was like, okay, let's see what it does. Because supposedly, with the idea though is it's analyzing 500 million websites at once. Like, now again, something that
that's wild,
right? It is. So then, tell me why it produced like the best, best short story ever. Like, I can never write a story as good as it wrote about Max the Mighty Mouse or whatever it was.
Can you help with homework? I'm still in college.
It does, and colleges are trying to figure it out about how to make it work. But I'm saying all of that because we have the most advanced but by definition, we have the most technology in recorded history ever, but things don't seem to be better.
Yeah.
Families, marriages, relationships, connections, one another, like how we get along. In fact, like it seems to be like more toxic than ever, right? As far as, in my own lifetime. So all of that to say, just the reality that it paints is something's wrong. Something's not right. And when in my investigative journey and observing and thinking like, hey, why is this wrong? It's so much that ties back to a principle that they're not using from God's word.
Yeah. I heard that, and I never, because I like when people say something, like even if it's on podcasts, on YouTube, whatever, I like to make sure it's an actual statistic that's real. But what someone said on like one of those red pill channels or whatever, she said that 60% of like older women are going to end up single. So banks are investing in like cat food and like other single lady products or whatever. But all that to say is it's like, like all the information, all the empowerment, all the freedom, accepting of almost any idea at this point. I mean, is crazy. And yet still we're not getting the good results for it.
Right. Right. Exactly. All right. So we covered, I know we talked about number your faith perspective. All right. So here's another question that we discussed, which is, so what does make people happy or content?
What does make people happy or content?
We talked about like Lil Wayne as far as what does not. Right?
Yeah.
And you even maybe tapped into it a little bit as well with your story, but what's your perspective about that now?
I think part of it has to do with mentality. I mean, you have people that are. I mean, they've done science research on like poor countries that. I mean, they work very, very hard for survival every single day, and they're more happy than Americans.
Yeah.
And similar things with even. I think they did a study on like homeless people here in America. I mean, of course, like the majority of them were not more happier than us, but they were able to find some that were like more happier than the average American, right? So I think portion of it has to do with your mentality, right? I think, but you could completely go all mentality and like kind of lie to yourself, but I think some money is important to do that. Like,
yeah,
I mean, if you want to support a family, I mean, you can't go to the bank with a happy mentality or pay your rent with positivity, right? So I think it could be a plethora of things. I know, studying psychology and stuff like that, doing something where you feel like you're giving back to society,
right,
and back to community, helping others out. That I feel like that makes you. If we're talking in a worldly sense, there's so many times I've never been a crier. Right.
Yeah.
Ever. And I've re-nicknamed the church that I go to, CBC, Community Bible Church, to Crying Bible Church. And I'm not the only one who feels like that. But ever since I became more of a Christian, it's easier for me to cry. And it's not crying out of like sadness. It's crying out of like when you witness love, like, and it's complete authenticity.
Yeah.
And you realize that that's what's important in life. It just does something, at least to me, that like, it's like, okay, have you ever watched those military videos where they're coming home and they haven't seen their kid in like 3 years or something ridiculous?
Oh, yes,
and like,
yes.
like that's something like that can be compared to, right? And so when you see people that are just completely sacrificing things for others, like just out of the genuineness of their heart, not because they're getting like a camera on them, they're trying to get like clout. But just living a life like that, like for instance, on this Thanksgiving, I started a thing with some friends and we gave to some families that were in need, that were struggling to provide a meal for their families. I don't think I've felt that happy and that content in a long time. I think the only uncontentness I had is wanting to keep doing it again. What's your perspective
on happiness and contentment? Yeah, so I think there's an element of, I think what you said, I mean, there's something about love. Like, okay, so there's I think there's a love, at least a couple of different ways. And there's the element of love of like virtuous living. I think a loving life. I think that's what kind of that 1 Corinthians 13, like that, love is patient, love is kind. But then when you see the love between people, I think is incredibly meaningful. Like I've asked my mom, for example, like, hey, when are you happiest? Like, when is it when you are happiest as a person, human being? Like, when is that for you? And she's like, when my kids are together. I'm like, oh, interesting. Again, if a lot of experiences, and roller coaster, business builder, a property going through, or whatever she's doing with her hustle. But no, it was like.
So when's the last time y'all got together?
I'm together with her all the time. I was talking to her when you got here today.
She said plural. Kids.
We were over there. I mean, for her in that space, she's had people. She will throw out messages about us, getting to go over there.
That's awesome.
I was over there just
that's beautiful.
This past week. So
yeah.
So but yeah, I think about those things. I think those are the most meaningful parts of life. Like. Again, we could go over passage over passage. I think about like the John 15 passage. Jesus said, like, there's no greater love than one who lays down their life for somebody else. So,
what's funny though? I feel like people will listen to this or they'll hear from somewhere else, And they'll be like, yeah, that's true. And then they'll go back to their rat race life and like constantly desiring the next car, the next promotion, more money. And it's like the applying this knowledge is easier, I think, than just like sitting here talking about it. You know what I mean? Like changing your mentality to be this is the hard part, because naturally I think we're designed to want more, to accomplish more. And if you feed into that too much, that will make you uncontent. It'll make you unhappy. It'll keep you desiring, right? They say enjoy the journey, not the destination. Mm-hmm. So like, yeah, I would challenge anybody to like, hey, apply that to your actual mentality. Don't just say that's a cool message. Like, I agree with it. Like, you know, do it.
Yep. Yes. Yes.
There's a last part to my testimony.
God revealed himself.
Yeah.
How did God reveal himself to you?
So, and I think this was, because I had asked for God to reveal himself to me for a long time. And I think that's kind of one of the reasons why I fell away the first time. This next time, like I said, I believe my faith superseded my doubt. I was on the way to Oregon to go to my brother's wedding. And the whole time, I just started contemplating everything that we had talked about previously, right? So I always previously download on the plane, so I make sure I have some good material to watch. And all I downloaded was like, it's so funny. This pastor came to my head, T.D. Jakes, and I had no idea who he was. I have no idea why. Excuse me. Why it came in my head. So I downloaded a bunch of T.D. Jakes stuff without looking at it, right? And then he comes on my screen and I'm like, oh, he's black? Not that I cared, but T.D. Jakes sounds like a white name to me. I don't know. Not like Joel Osteen's cousin was going to come on or something. But he was really, really great to listen to. Matter of fact, I'm reading a book by him right now called Destiny. But yes, completely seeking him out, watching all the tests. The huge one was watching, I think it's called Delate Testimonies. For me, every testimony I ever heard where someone saw something in real life that was supernatural, they either were like drug addicts or currently on drugs. Yeah. And the constant, like I'm watching tons of testimonies, right? And I'm watching a bunch of people that have testimonies that never even touched a cigarette or anything drug related at all, right? And I'm in my Bible. I'm reading finally. I'm praying a lot. Like, if I'm not doing anything that has to do with the wedding or the family at that moment, like I'm going to God, like I'm fully seeking him out. And I think that was I just feel like compared to the other times, like this is me actually fully seeking him out. And I believe that's one of the reasons why he finally did decide to reveal himself to me. So I like dropped down in the closet, put myself in a little closet because I was like in the upstairs villa, but there was like, it was like it's not like a man cave or whatever, but like it's not a room either. Like you can see above it. You know what I mean? Like one of those little secret rooms or whatever. That's what it kind of felt like. So I went to the closet and like just fully gave myself to God and just surrendered, asked for forgiveness, everything, right? So then at the airport, going back to Texas, there was a delay in my flight. I got stuck in Salt Lake City. That was my one stop. Yeah. Well, I didn't just get delayed. I got like you sleeping on the floor with this soft rinky-dink pillow and this thin blanket. And so I get there. I'm pretty upset, right? And I'm kind of like just gave myself to God, right? And I kind of go off in a Christian way, I think at the time, right? And I finally just submitted, like, we gonna be here. Like, cause they were like, oh, we have a hotel for you. And then like nobody really got a hotel. Like, oh yeah, you can pay for it. And then we're gonna pay, then we'll give you the money back. And then like, but then I have to pay with I gotta have an Uber. Then I got to like get up like after 4 hours and then like it was just too much, right? So I just spent the night on the floor. Of course, got no sleep on the hard airport floor with lights and constant annoying commercial music playing, right? Got onto the plane maybe 12 hours later, landed. At this point, I'm just in time for the latest service CBC has at 1:21, right? And I said, I'm going to it. At this point, I'm probably up for like, I don't know, 20, 25, 26, 27 hours. No care in the world. I am going. Like I'm lit. Like I'm super excited to go, right? So I get there and the music starts playing, they start worshiping, and this emotion comes over me that is weird. Like it feels like I want to break down crying, right? And I'm like, that's weird. I feel pretty joyful. I'm not like sad about anything. I'm not thinking about anything depressing or anything like that. Yeah. And I'm like, well, I'm gonna ignore it. Cause like, that's weird. I'm nothing to be sad about. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it just gets stronger and stronger and stronger, right? And to the point where I'm like, dang, like I think I'm about to break down right now, right? And I got like one of the front rows, right? I went completely by myself, so I didn't have to like work with somebody to get a seat with me. I got to go right in the front, right at the time that I wanted. So I'm like, well, I'm about to break down. Like, I don't want anyone to ask me why I'm breaking down or like try and ask me, how can I pray for you? Because I'll be like, I don't know. And then how much more of a psycho will I look like, right? Like, I'm just here crying for no reason, you know? So, and then I'm sure there was a little man ego in there. So I go down to the stage because they said on the altar, the in between songs, like, hey, if anybody has like, I don't know, something dramatic or something going on in their life, come down to the stage. We want to pray for you. And I remember thinking at that moment, I was like, oh, that'd be great for other people because I'm not going through anything right now. Like I generally hope they get the prayer and healing that they need. Yeah. Not knowing about 1 minute it's finna be me, right? Yeah. So I feel like, oh, it's gonna come. Like, let me go down there. So, bro, like I am like it's the ugliest cry. Like I felt like someone died and nobody's died. Like right. It's just coming down, right? And then I feel like a presence come over me, and what did he tell me? The first thing he tells me, because I used to have I would say it was close to a hatred for homeless people. Like I didn't like them, right? I was in the police academy, and the instructor told me, "Oh, you like, hey, there's a sign that he took from one of the homeless people he arrested, and on it would be like the different streets that he would what is it called, like beg for or whatever. Yeah, and then it would talk about how much money he would make at each street at a certain time, right? And he was like, yeah, this guy made upwards of close to 6 figures. And like I looked it up, and it was like the average homeless person makes like $80K at the time, right? And I'm like, that's an insane amount of money, right? Like people work very hard their whole lives to get that amount of money, right? And then I've heard other stories of like giving homeless people food and they throw it on the ground. I don't want that crap. I remember I was in Austin one time on 6th Street. And this guy came to me like, please, man, like, can I get you some money for some food? And literally right next to us is a Subway. And I'm like, bet, I'll get you any sandwich you want. Let's go. Nah, man, can you just give me the money? And I'm like, you literally just said it was for food. Like, you don't want to eat fresh? You know what I mean? So, and he was like, nah, man. He was like, come on, man, I got AIDS. Like literally just screamed, I got AIDS at me, like it was some kind of Dave Chappelle skit or something. Like it was wild. And I was like, nah, man, I'm sorry. Like I don't want to contribute to, you know, whatever habit that might be. So my impression of like homeless people was very, very low, right? And funny I say that because I had a friend's mom who told me at one point, don't ever hate, or her grandma told her like, or she told her grandma, don't ever hate anybody, one particular person, because you'll end up with someone in your family like that, right? And sure enough, someone in my family close to me did become like that, right? Yeah. And so the first thing that God tells me coming over me is he says, you know, like those people, like the homeless people, I knew what he was talking about like right away, right? And he goes, those people have like, or think about all the problems that you had growing up and how that severely limited your life. Like, I know that if I had a better childhood in certain areas of my childhood growing up, that, you know, I would have made better decisions. I would have got a scholarship, you know, did whatever the case may be, right? And I was like, yes, Lord, like, you know, I understand. And he goes, well, those people, like the homeless people, they've been through worse than you have. And how dare you judge them? Bro, when he said that, like it came out even worse, like ugly crying. Yeah. There was a couple other things that I feel like he was revealing all the sin that I thought was like not a big deal at that time. Like just, you know, like being very, very selfish. I was very, very selfish. And I feel like the world put me in that place, or I allowed the world to put me in that place. Let me take responsibility because of holding on to the friendships and relationships and feeling like, you know, I would give everything for certain people and then like not even caring to like even hang out anymore. Like this like not understanding that like, hey, like life has everyone has their seasons. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And be accepting of that, and it's okay to move on or whatever. But feeling like all this betrayal by people and stuff like that, I think I was turning into a very selfish person where everything was really about me. And how that hurt other people. And I'm thinking of like more minuscule here, but there's other bigger things. You know what I mean? And feeling the weight of my sin, and the Lord telling me like, hey, just imagine if like you were never, if you like, how hurt do you feel right now? Because I'm crying, right? Because of this, I'm feeling all this. And he's like, imagine if you never would stop sinning, like you never came to me, like the more sin you would continue to do, and how much worse that would feel. You know what I mean? And I was, just breaking down from there. So it's like funny. Like I feel like God revealed Himself to me, but it's like a pretty strong rebuking. But it was like, it was that relevance that I felt like I needed to like be like, he revealed Himself to me in some type of way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, respect. One of the things that I appreciate about it is people's personal experience. One, it's very precious to them. Two, what I've learned along the way is how precious it is to be able to hear somebody else's without having to have had that same experience myself, right? So like that's something that I think I found a growing interest and fascination with, especially in the faith journey, because if you like, I'm interested in a Christian YouTube, right? Like how people, in the Christian YouTubers and all of that. And when I'm going into Christian YouTube, I see a lot of people, on one side of the camp, or like, again, so maybe the charismatics, again, the people who speak in tongues, healing, driving out demons and all of these things, who raising the dead, like again, they got a strong YouTube presence. Evangelicals have a strong YouTube presence as well. But it's what I value and appreciate is being able to hear about somebody else's experience and being okay with not having personally that experience myself, and then also wanting to be a voice of encouragement to people who don't have those experiences in their entire Christian journey, right? So that's what it's important to me, because we can be almost overloaded with examples or stories of these type, and what if that's not? What if what if what if not you, but I think about that person who might not get God revealing them to them, and it's okay. I think it's okay. So, but hearing one, it makes me grateful that you had a special experience where you're able to feel like, hey, God reached out, touched me personally. Yeah. And then two, I think for me as I process it, I always want to be there's one additional voice of, hey, here's what my experience was like. My experience wasn't yours. It's different. I think it's interesting too, even coming from the churches that I'm connected with, again, the International Churches of Christ and even Church of Christ stuff. Like it's very like logical deduction. Nothing wrong with that. There's a strength in that. And even if you look at like how Jesus and Paul broke down Old Testament passages, there's a logical deduction approach to passages. And then, so in some ways it could be less mystery, more logic. Again, there's something good in that. Yeah. And then to be able to hear other people, so it was more, I would almost call what you experienced a more mystery than logic. Is that fair?
For sure, yeah. I mean, anything supernatural I would put in that space. The funny thing is, though, is that when I remember being at church, and before the emotions started coming out, where I feel like God came onto me, I remember saying, you know what, God, like if you don't decide to reveal it to me to yourself, decide to reveal yourself to me at all, like I'm surrendering that to you. Yeah. And every time I've surrendered something that was really important to me, to God, I feel like He's rewarded me for it. I was literally in that church right beforehand. Like, I'm gonna believe you no matter what, because the amount of evidence that I've gotten over, and at least in my life, has led me to believe, like, man, I'm gonna do it your way now. And then boom, that happens. But I understand your logic. I remember the scriptures going over like supernatural things happening. Now, I do believe supernatural things still happen today, but I don't think it's like what's his name, Benny Hinn, where he's like just touching people,
slap you with his magical coat.
I have no idea. I don't even watch stuff like that, right? But like where you're touching the forehead, people are like shaking and like doing the Harlem Shake and like faint, like Yeah, like I don't think it happens that way, right? Like,
so you're not Harlem shaking, bro?
Yeah.
Over there at Crying Bible Church?
Run around the place catching the spirit. No.
Same. Yeah, go ahead.
But yeah, there's one more point. But I do think supernatural things happen, but I don't think they happen like how they did when, like, you know, Jesus was like touching people and like, oh, now you're healed. And like, I don't think it goes through people like it used to, right? Like, or through the apostles even afterwards, right? I think there was scriptures about where it ends or something like that. We can go over that here in a second. But I do see, like, okay, for instance, Michaela Peterson, I was watching her testimony, and her like she had a extremely rare cancer, like 100% fatality rate, and her mom wakes up and tells her, yeah, I'll be better by me and Jordan Peterson's, that's her dad.
Right.
I'll be better by our anniversary, which is like a month from now. And they're like, yeah, okay, whatever. Right. And this is not a Christian believing family at all at this point.
Yeah.
Right. And then literally right on the anniversary, like the doctors don't understand why she's cured. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So like, I think miracles do happen. Just maybe God's taking it away from humans because of how sinful we are, and we might use it to be like, to boast ourselves, make money, to gain fame, or insert whatever sin here. You know what I mean?
Yeah. You know, again, I just think some of the things are interesting per group or per background. I think I'm not as strong on that side of it as saying like I think I pay attention to the language people use and and what is that language doing? Like, to say something is not doing, like, so for me to say what God doesn't do through people now, like that's mathematically, again, we talk about like the statistical standpoint, like I can't possibly know 8 billion stories. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
True. Yeah.
I can say what God has done to me, and I could say situations that people have talked to me about, that, you know, in people that hey, this person is really believable. I'm actually not on screen. Whoops. But I can't. So I think I have to kind of navigate that in the statement of what God doesn't do is always interesting to me. I'm not. I try to be mindful of when I say that. Now people have told me stories, and I like to talk spectrum a lot, and maybe that's just, you know, my way of processing the Christian experience, where if people tell me like a supernatural story, even your story, right?
Sure.
Like, so I go, so there's the skeptic way over here. It's like, bro, that wasn't God. That was just you. Like, you gave yourself that thought. You know what I'm saying? Like, and then this one over here is saying, oh, bro, like, yeah, God works in mysterious ways. He was speaking to you. Like, most of my innate space, I could be over here. Not extreme, like, certainly not the extreme disrespectful, but more go, maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. But
sure,
I'm not going to co-sign. I'm not going to co-sign that, right? Like, that's kind of where I could be.
Like, your doubt supersedes your faith at that point, because you were over here. So
well, right. So right, my innate space could be here, where my respect, I'll push my respect and say, hey, like, God, how could I even know for sure that God did not speak to Matt that day at CBC, crying, being prayed over, you know, whatever? Like, how could I know? I couldn't.
Right.
So now if my natural leaning is over here, I'm just aware of it and going, okay, well, from the spectrum perspective, I'm able to see that. So anyway, but back to like personal experience, I think it's an interesting one when we talk about personal experience. And it's funny you brought up Michaela Peterson, because Michaela Peterson said that most of the way that God revealed to himself to her is when she's on psychedelics, which is like a whole different.
Well, I didn't mention the psychedelic part. I did hear that. I didn't finish that video, but yeah, I did.
Okay, did you? Yeah. So, but for me, again, so I'm 19 years in. Again, I just have one story. So in my story, I don't get audible voices from God. Not saying he can't, not saying he won't, but saying this 19 years in, he hasn't. Now, same thing when it comes to, you know, speaking in tongues or like miraculous healings, or, you know, again, I know my story, it just hasn't happened. Have I preached in front of a variety of crowds? For sure. Again, prisons, or from Central America, churches, nonprofit organizations, and I've spoke God's word even over other non-Christian spaces, and these things don't break out even in non-Christian spaces, which is like an interesting thing to me when I think about, again, experience. Sometimes people will accuse the experiences, like, why are those experiences reserved for the charismatic churches? So I'll give you an example. Is people talk about like driving out demons, like, oh, like, how come all the demon possessed people go to those churches? You know what I'm saying? Like, like again, it makes you
go to that church. Right?
Okay, let me count my blessings and be grateful they're not showing up. But it is an interesting thing.
No, that's true. Pentecostals, like, why do they speak more in tongues than others?
Well, the idea of all of 19 years, again, I haven't preached for 19 years, but in my 19 years of sharing God's word in different settings, you would think that there would be random, explosions, or like you see a wide variety of Christian experiences. I haven't, and I'm just want people to know that if they're in that camp where they haven't seen a lot of experiences, they don't have to. And you could, and that's where I begin to talk about, like, some people say they go spectrum to the extreme. If you don't have these experiences, you don't speak in. Some people go so far in the extreme. If you don't speak in tongues, you're not saved, right? Crazy. And then I go, like, that statement of somebody.
Like, what scripture's that?
Right. Well, the statement, our idea of saying, hey, you don't have the Holy Spirit. That's the part that's connected with being saved, the spirit of sonship, and being saved by that. So the reason that's connected and relevant, I go, that's interesting for somebody to make the claim about me not being saved.
So what advice would you give to somebody who is in that same field as you? Like, for you, for some reason, you can maybe explain why it's not a stumbling block for you. But for someone else who's like, hey, I've never seen anything, therefore God is not real or Christianity isn't real, then, like, what advice would you give to someone like that to give them faith?
Yeah. So, well, one, I believe faith comes from hearing God's word. That's what Romans 10 tells us, right? So, so hearing the words of Jesus is what gives us faith. John 10 tells us as well that these things were written down so that you would believe. So, like, we have things written down. The word being preached or the word being read is supposed to be what inserts faith into our lives. So what I tell people about is when people, I think my experience goes, for somebody to call me unsaved in also not having the Holy Spirit, that idea, again, I think that's one of the most, from a doubt perspective, that's one I could doubt the most when it comes to the Holy Spirit. Like, the idea that the Holy Spirit lives in people is like, whoa, that's a crazy thought. But I say that because if somebody said I wasn't saved, didn't have the Holy Spirit, then it would be the idea that everything that's happened in my life, all the other stuff, okay, so somebody can read the whole Bible. I have journals and journals and journals of prayer journals that I've done. So you said all that wasn't inspired by the Holy Spirit? Like, or what about going to prison? You're saying Derek did that on his own? Like, Derek did that? Speaking to orphans in Central America, volunteering with the battered women's shelter. Like, you start going through, and I don't think this is boasting in the sense. I think it's more of like in the book of Acts in chapter 15 and 21, they talk about reporting in detail about what they had done. That's what Paul would do when they would get together with the believers. So they would report in detail what God had done through them. So anyway, I look at my portfolio or my heavenly resume, and for somebody to say that Derek wrote those things and did those things and not the Holy Spirit, I'm like, dang, that's crazy. I'm not that. I don't consider myself that godly or that holy or that righteous to be able to do those things on my own. I'm like, man, that's God working through me. So that's kind of what I say to them when they're saying you. So my thing is, with no supernatural crazy experiences, I've still been able to do what God calls me to do, to be a person who's devoted in prayer, who lets the word of God, dwell in me richly, who goes to prison, orphans syndrome, like all these things. I go, okay, like I have great reasons. And I didn't even list a lot of other stuff that I'm involved with.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So I look back at who I was before and then who I am now and things that have happened in my life. I'm going, man, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And that does build my faith as far as seeing what God has done through me.
Yeah. And in a sense, that could be viewed as supernatural. Like I have, again, like I talked about a little bit about this earlier, but I've had things tell me to stop doing something and I have no idea why. And then later it'll be revealed to me that how it improved my life in this area. Yeah. Like stop drinking coffee. Like what? Like why? Like it's healthy for you. Like there's so many benefits for it. Yeah. And then that stopped messing with some like acid reflux and some other problems that I had. You know what I mean? Or, get off of social media or, don't, stop doing this or do that or live my life this way. And then like all of a sudden, bam, like I don't understand the context or reasoning behind it until I either research it after where I already do it or I do it and then see the benefits that it brings or something like that. Like there was nothing about me thinking about that at all. I was just living my life, and then for something to like my mind just to kind of like kick in and tell me that, like, what the heck, like, what's that? You know, like,
yeah,
I don't know. That's an experience I believe for me.
There's one or maybe even a couple that I've had, which was like, again, it wasn't an audible voice, but it was more of like almost like this supernatural agreement, which was like me drinking alcohol, and it was the experience of,
oh, that's right.
If you stop drinking alcohol, you'll see all of your dreams come true. If you
and now I'm back. Sorry, you alley-ooped me on that one.
If you don't, you'll live a fine life. Be fine. And then so I was like, again, it wasn't the voice, it was like this understanding. And I was like, oh, okay, like, like, okay, I'll stop drinking alcohol. And I have seen, again, like, that's an interesting thing, like
3 books later.
Right. The book stuff, again, other things that have happened in my life, and I've seen a lot of things that I wanted to do done.
Yeah.
And things that haven't been done, like, which is, I think, book writing and book selling are different things, but I've never had like the big ambition to sell a bunch of books. It was always, I just want to write them, you know, like,
wow, that's
like,
interesting.
So, but if we're talking about, if that was divine, if it was supernatural, and if God gave me that, then it was like, I did my part, right?
Yeah.
He did his part. And there was part of my effort that was involved in between. And I've studied, habit formation and studied successful principles and things like that. But I just, again, that would be like maybe one that's kind of related. That one of the stories, maybe I have like 2 or 3 of those. So yeah.
Yeah, that's powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that gives people faith maybe to look back at their own lives. And I have seen one supernatural thing that was not good, but it was in my friend. It was in my friend's house. Everybody had seen something crazy. Had weird things happen to them.
Like a haunted house?
Yeah, like the house.
Or possessed or something?
Yeah, legit, like they would say like, oh yeah, there was physical prints on me or whatever. And I'm like, why do I still spend the night at this house? You're a really good friend. But I remember one time, this was like maybe 3:00 in the afternoon, still daylight out. I'm opening up the window because we forgot the keys. The door was locked, so we went through his window. I get in, and my friend, his leg is halfway in, and the door like slams shut. I'm like, okay, normal. Like the window's open, like the pressure in the house, shuts the door, whatever, right? And then all of a sudden, all you hear was doom, 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 like going up the stairs. And then the upstairs door slammed shut like hard. And that's where all the evil stuff came from, was in the upstairs room or whatever. And it was so funny. I laughed because my friend like had one leg in. And when that happened, he was like, he just fell back. Like he couldn't get out fast enough. And I jumped out too. But I think that would be like the only supernatural thing I think I've had. Like when I saw, another funny story. I went with this girl to the tracks, San Antonio tracks.
Go
ahead. To give reference for anyone who's not from San Antonio, there's these tracks on the south side, and it's uphill. I mean, the hill's so small, but it's uphill, right? And then for some reason, like they say, the kids died there. They got hit by a train or whatever. I don't even think the train goes there anymore, but they died. So the little kids will push you over. And so sure enough, you put your car in neutral and you're going like up this small hill, like we're talking small, and your car goes over it, right? So we went over and we put baby powder on the back of the car, and there was like no fingerprints, right? Because they said that you'd have little baby fingerprints, right?
Yeah.
So we're kind of talking outside, right? We're with me and the other girl I was seeing at the time, and we're like, let's do it again. So we turn back around, and it happens again, and then we get all excited. We go outside to look at the baby powder, and the fingerprints are on the car.
Yeah.
So we're like, me and my friend are freaking out. We're like, how is it? No, there's no way. And like, we're like literally like, just like amazed and like shocked. And we just can't stop talking about it. And then like 10 minutes later, the girls just bust out laughing and like, we got you. I felt so dumb at that moment. Like, who believes that? So it's not a real supernatural thing. But.
Yeah, it definitely is part of San Antonio lore. Definitely went to that growing up. They said there's even additional stories that if you press the brakes as they pushed you over, then they would bust your windows for stopping them from saving you.
It's just their forehead.
We never tried that one out though, because none of us
piss the ghost off.
But we did the powder and all that, and it was more just revealed prior fingerprints from people who put their hand there.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah. Yeah. So the supernatural. Yeah, man. So you got your story of faith, your redemption, your apologetics perspective, sociology. Those things helped you.
Yeah.
Then you had this God revealing Himself to you.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
And you gave your church a shout out too. You even gave him a new nickname.
Shout out Pastor Ed. Derek's church is cool too. Mission Point. I remember one Bible study I wore a CBC shirt, and I was like, I don't know. I just brought it up and suspect. False doctrine. No, just kidding.
Yeah. Well, good, man. There's I feel like for future episodes, maybe we could put up some clips. We get a few responses to a few clips. But
yeah, I'll definitely make some short clips of some of the major interesting points. So you don't have to watch however long this is.
Very good, man. Anything else? Any last words? You want to speak right into the camera? So let me give you the camera angle here. All right, right there.
Yeah,
right
I would say that me coming to Jesus was not one thing that made me come to Christ. So they've definitely taught me to have a lot more grace, a lot more patience for people who may be considering things, and maybe they just haven't had enough of what God's going to show them yet. So I would do this message for like both Christians and non-Christians, like, hey, if you're looking, it may not just come right away from one thing. You may have a lot of doubts to either overcome or new information to take in or different things to consider. So don't, and then people, Christians who are trying to get people to come to the faith, because we know that life is so beautiful on this side. Don't be discouraged when you're working on someone or you're reaching out to someone and trying to love on them and get them to see what you see is true. It may just take a plethora of things like it took me. So just as God has patience and grace with us, continue to have patience and grace on anyone seeking, and have patience and grace on yourself if you are seeking. So that's what I'd like to say, closing out.
Hey, that's powerful. So thank you guys for checking in, and we gotta let them know when we go. I guess we'll make a post later about when our next one will be.
Yeah, we want to cover some controversial topics, right? Some interesting stuff, or some different from like a different perspective, right? Analytical perspective, maybe social norms today and
so
pop culture.
This is So Michaela Peterson, she had a video. She had a cult person on.
That's fun.
Yeah. So the funny thing is, in the episode they did mention our church. The cult expert could mention our church as one of the. I think Michaela asked the question. She said, "What did she say?" She said, "What's like the biggest cult that's still around?" But again, he didn't say it was us. He was talking about. I think he was talking.
Oh, y'all got an honorable mention.
right. Well, he mentioned us, and then she went on to another topic. So we're the only mention in that category. So, but the context in which he mentioned it was that because categorically, a cult would be somebody where you had a main leader, and that's one of the qualifications. So one, our church doesn't. So here's talking about when Kit became led it, which that was 20 years ago, or whatever, 21 years ago.
So you used to be a cult.
So right, according to his definition, like, okay, is it strong mind control? Is it separation of friends and family? Is it one leader? Is their perspective considered like divine? Which some of those things I think were off. But when it
was like, is control in there or something?
Yeah, mind control, behavioral control,
Okay.
all of that. So And I think there has to be a goal, like for like money or something like that. Money has to be some kind of oriented, connected.
It's weird. Y'all don't even have a physical building.
Right. But I mean, so that again, if you really consider those perspectives, like, okay, well, where's the money going? If you ain't like, there's one thing to say, hey, well, we ain't got no money, we ain't got a building, or it's like, well, y'all ain't got no money because you're using it on something else and not the building. Is what that other perspective would say. But anyway, I say all that because I saw it on her video and I was like, oh, I haven't seen this come up with any of my friends in the ICOC. And then there's another article that came out. Rolling Stones came out with another article about us. So. That was like from like 30, 40 years ago. And I'm like, yeah, like I'm innocent. Like I wasn't even part of it back then. You know, I'm like 19 years in. But anyway, I think
So if you saw Michaela, what would you tell her?
So that interview is so intense. Like it wouldn't. So about the cult, about us?
Yeah, it was like, correct her. Humble yourself, woman.
Okay, so it wasn't Michaela, it was the cult expert she had on. That was the one that
we'll delete the episode. Give me his number.
But it was funny, which is like I just didn't expect them to mention or whatever. Any group that I knew, like you just hear about the main ones, like David Koresh in Waco and the other ones.
That was a wild movie.
Yeah, you see, which one did you see?
Like you almost had, I don't know. I think it may have been the newer one, where the kids they get like burned at the end, trying to escape.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, but I
think it's newer on Netflix. It was on Netflix.
Okay, yeah,
it's like a couple years old.
The one with the guy from Friday Night Lights.
Man, brother, I don't watch a lot of things. I'm lucky I watched that.
Okay.
But yeah, it was a Netflix like highlight, like just released. So it was only a couple of years old.
Yeah. It is interesting whenever you see.
You almost have like pity on the cult. It's like the FBI didn't have to do all that.
Okay.
Yeah, not in the sense like, oh, I think the cult should keep going, but in the sense of like, man, the FBI really went overboard. Like they killed all those children. Like they really didn't have to go to those extremes to do what they did. I mean, like that's clearly the viewpoint that Netflix is trying to go. Or whoever made the movie.
Interesting. I don't think I remember getting that. I don't know if I saw it. I think some of our arts were like disturbing. And I was like, I think I turned it off. Well, the funny thing is like whenever
taking everyone's wives, it's crazy.
I think it is interesting the behaviors that they'll personify with these cult leaders, and you go, okay, let me never, behave like that or whatever. Like, but again, sometimes I remember one of the things he would say, at least in the movie, was it was like, oh, I've memorized every verse in the whole Bible or whatever.
Yeah,
and I was like, oh, dang. Sometimes I talk about what I've memorized, and I'm like, maybe I shouldn't be saying that because that's like associated with this dude over here, So, again, not that I've memorized every verse, but just talking about what you've learned or what you've observed or whatever sometimes. Like,
no, still talk about it.
Well, talking about how much, like,
okay.
I've memorized one thing from every chapter of the 1,189 chapters of the Bible, right? It's like, is there a true value add there, or is that
right?
Is that just like a weird,
for sure,
flex?
Yeah.
So
Christian flex.
Yeah.
Carry my cross longer than you do.
Yeah. I think you. So you did your exit. I don't know if I have anything else, but
what do you think about movies like the Jeffrey Dahmer movie? For me, it was kind of disturbing. Like, want to watch that. For me, I feel like some of that is like, dude, there were actual women who were like lusting after him. Like, not only, of course, in the time, but like in the like when the Netflix special came out. Like, yeah, he was kind of hot. Like, there was like TikTokers who were saying, I don't know why, but I felt so bad for him after he got arrested. Like, what are you like? So I feel like in a sense, like it was like glorifying the devil's work. And then if you're not like glorifying that, you're literally just watching a whole movie about like how the devil really influenced one person and watching the work that like he did. Like, I don't see what positivity comes through it besides being entertained. But what are your thoughts on it?
Well, he was baptized by a Church of Christ preacher?
Like after or before?
in prison.
Oh, no, the actual Jeffrey Dahmer.
The actual one.
Oh, I thought you meant the actor. Oh, wow. Are you serious?
Yeah. So you and him have something in common. No, just
you just got a sound effect for that? There's a burn. Well, you came from that church, so. ICOC, COC. that why y'all left? Made your own?
No, but the dude who baptized them did an interview with one of the Christian YouTubers and was talking about the experience. So maybe you and I could watch one of our streams.
We just make our opinion like I already did. Push the button.
We could watch the stream of the interview between the Christian YouTuber and Jeffrey Dahmer. Jeffrey Dahmer's
actor.
Baptist due to
the real one. Okay.
The real Church of Christ minister. Yeah.
Oh wow. I say everything I just said. I said that, and then I actually watched the interview with Jeffrey Dahmer, and like, God, that was creepy. I was like, why did I do that? Like,
oh no,
that like give me no benefit. Like I really relate that back to like Philippians 4. Focus on things that are pure, that are right, that are excellent or praiseworthy. Just neither of those things.
Yeah, no, that's it's a great point. When I started doing prison stuff, I don't know why I did this, but never. If you want to do the opposite of what the Bible says, do this. What I'm about to tell you, it's the opposite of the verse he just quoted from Philippians 4:8, and it's so I was gonna start doing prison ministry stuff, but I was like, oh, like there's so much available online that you could read about stuff. So you could go online on the prison websites and go, oh, I could read about every person who's on death row in Texas and what they did.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, you're reading the most terrible, horrific things that human beings do. And it's like worthy of being, that the state of Texas would worthy them of dying over this stuff.
Right.
So it's the worst of the worst of the worst.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh. Afterward, I was like,
do I even want to go to prison ministry?
Right. Dude, I don't want to help anybody. Can I just go to an island and wait for whatever, Jesus to come back?
Well, I thought you were going to say that you just like watched, it's not Scared Straight, but it's like a documentary, like where they go over like what the prison life is actually like. Like they'll insert somebody in there and then like you'll see all the scary stuff that happens. And then I thought you were saying you're going to be scared to go to prison. No. So you're a real man. You weren't scared.
After the first time, no. I mean, I feel like...
Then you saw someone get stabbed.
No, I think it was from the very beginning. I think they had a lot of honor, like in the program that I was in.
That's awesome.
Now in prison, it's not like general population. Like you're not a gen pop. It's not like you're just walking in. Everybody's like doing their.
Sure,
like
yeah.
You're literally going into a classroom for well-behaved inmates.
They got to earn it,
and they might have even signed up for the faith-based curriculum. So it's like, you got to.
So they wanted to be there.
You got a number of parameters, and they even chose in the prison I was going to. They chose to live in a faith-based dorm too. So,
wow.
And like supposedly in prison code, like
you don't hear about stuff like that. That's a blessing.
Yeah, in the prison code, they won't mess with you. So you do have to pick a gang when you join, like as far as to stay safe. Yeah. But if you go to the faith-based route, they'll leave you alone if the reason you're not joining anything is because of your religious affiliation. So
does that mean like if you're a white person, you can pray for a black person or a Mexican person after that, or you still have to only pray for white people? Because like in the prisons, I think that's more in like federal, like big penitentiaries. But from what I watch, is like the races are forced to stick together, and you can't really like be friends amongst each other too much.
Yeah, I think that was the same. That was the same. Well, it was the same when it comes to joining different gangs. But
what have to become?
But if you on the faith-based route, it was mixed.
Oh, so you could pray for anybody?
Yeah. Well, what do you mean pray for people?
Or like minister to like?
Yeah.
Okay.
But what was funny was I was there one time and I was talking about one of the like Matthew chapter 5 about Jesus saying like, why do you greet only your brothers? Like, what are you doing more than others? Like, in this idea, he's saying like greet people who are not like in your circle. Okay. So I was like talking to them about that. And they're like, no, you can't do that here. Like, like you can't be saying what's up to anybody. Like, that's not like
But again, the faith people can, but general pop can't.
No, the faith people couldn't say that.
Oh, so if I'm a white person in the faith part of the jail, I can only minister and pray for other white inmates.
No. I'm sorry. So what I was getting at was, it's not like. So even like saying hello, hi, what's up to somebody who's working on the weight bench, but they're not in your group. Like, no, you can't do that. Like, you can't greet somebody across the lines.
In general pop.
Right.
Okay, cool. So
I
just wanted to understand that difference. Okay.
But yeah, so anyway,
Sorry for the confusion.
No, you're good. You're good. But yeah, man. All right. So future episodes.
Yeah, man. I like to. Just so many things that me and you both think about that we get these long conversations. I think it'd be great.
All right.
To put on here. So.
Yeah, man. We talk about submission next time.
Oh, definitely. There's so much positivity that I think goes into submission that people use the word. It's viewed so negatively in the English language, and like automatically like American culture, like submission, you would see in like a history book when someone loses a war or something, or like it's just viewed with such negative connotation when we all submit every single day to different things. And there's so many blessings that come from it. So I would like to be able to talk about it and show how it's a really positive thing instead of getting rid of this negative connotation on it. So
nice. I like it.
And if you guys have a topic we want to talk about,
feel free
to in the comments.
Give a topic, put that in the comments, and then we'll go from there. But if nothing else, man, good time hanging with you for a minute.
Yes, sir.
We'll put the music on and call it a day.
Alrighty.
Let's see here.
Appreciate everyone who watched.
Yes, sir. Did we get that? There we go.
You spit a freestyle, Derek. I'm on a Christian on a mission. No, I'm kidding.